Hey, welcome to the next episode of the College Football Junkies podcast. My name is Mark. My co-host Montana is right here as well. We've got a pretty big slate of college football going on this week. Let's start with the games that happened, Thursday and Friday. The only Thursday one of note, we had the Pitt Panthers against the Syracuse Orange. I expected this one to be a closer game because at the time we had a 5-1 Syracuse team going to a 6-0 Pitt team. I thought they were closer matched. Kyle McCord looked terrible. He looked like he was a deer standing in front of headlights. Like he threw 3 pick sixes, he threw 5 interceptions. People in Syracuse land are literally naming it a horror show because that's literally what that offense was. Dude, do you have any thoughts on how Kyle McCord showed up in this game? Because he wasn't fully prepared for what Pitt was giving him.
Not even was he not fully prepared. He wasn't prepared at all. He looked terrible. We have a list later on about the top quarterbacks in the league. And before that game, he might not have been on my list, but he would have been close on my list. He would have been in that top 5 conversation. But that was a terrible game. He played terrible football. Honestly, they don't look like a legitimate team. I never thought they were a playoff team, obviously, but I thought they were a legitimate team for their conference. But that is a game that you cannot have midseason. You shouldn't have it all. But if you're going to have a game where you're giving up something like that, it should be early in the season so you can bounce back. This is really hard to bounce back from. And I mean, looking at their schedule, they do have some games they definitely can win, and they definitely can bounce back, have a decent rest of the season. But this was a terrible look, and that specifically for the quarterback is the worst look you could possibly have.
Yeah, it was absolutely terrible. I mean, it was very reminiscent of Mike Riley years, when they had Tanner Lee and they were going up against Northern Illinois at home, and Tanner Lee threw 2 pick sixes and 4 interceptions total. It was terrible. I do think Kyle McCord can bounce back, but man, that performance, if he was up for any all conference honors, I think those are pretty much done after a 5 interception letdown. Let's go to our Friday slate now. The number 17 Boise State Broncos and the UNLV Rebels not only had, you know, conference stakes, but also a potential spot to get into the inaugural 12-team college football playoff. And this was a great game. UNLV got off to a really hot start. They were up 10-3 at the end of the first quarter, but then Boise State just started, running their offense the way they usually do behind Ashton Gianti. He had 128 yards, and they won 29-24. They rattled off 17 unanswered points in the second quarter. They were outscored 14-9 in the second half, but that second quarter was just a little bit too much. What are your thoughts on this Boise State team? Do you think this team has what it takes to potentially run the rest of the table and win the Mountain West, and get into the playoff? Or do you think UNLV will find a way to sneak their way in toward the end of the season?
Well, what I will say is we had Pat's fan checking in and always very positive, but said Boise State is overrated. And what I do want to say is this. To answer your question before I go into that, I don't think UNLV is touching the playoffs this season. I do think that they're making their name known and they're in the conversation, and there's a really good chance they make it next season or at least make that push further. Boise State, I think, definitely could win out and have a really good rest of their season. Are they winning the rest of their games completely undefeated, no obstacles? I don't think that's going to happen. And because of this game against UNLV, we've seen that they're not indestructible. No college football team ever is, especially nowadays with all the parity that can happen. But Boise State, it wasn't that they played a super terrible game. It's just that they were outplayed for most of that football game.
Yep.
And they did wake up. They got it done. When you've got a player we talked about him. He's number one still, obviously, in our I would say for sure in the Heisman rankings for me at least. And we talked about him last week. And so when you have a player like that, that's that dynamic, that can make a difference, and there's other players around him that can also make a difference in their respective positions, you get things done and you can make those comebacks happen. So could Boise State make like an 11-12 slot by the end of the season? I can see that. I don't see it going above that. I also can see them missing the playoffs. And that's not because Pat's fan, that's not because we'll run this one again. It's not because of this. It's not because they're overrated. It's because I truly think there's just a lot of parity. There's a lot of things that can happen, and they've proven that they're not indestructible. So UNLV, I don't think they're getting to the playoffs this season. Boise State, definitely, I think, has a chance, but I don't think it's for sure. It's not for sure for any team. There's so much that can happen. There's a lot of football left.
I think right now they are the highest ranked group of 5 teams, so that would ensure that they're in, if they can keep it up. Obviously, winning their conference would help with that, and potentially winning out too. They can't have 1 or 2 more losses, I don't think, for a group of 5 team. If they want to get in. But yeah, you touched on it. Ashton Gianti, he started off the game extremely slow, but man, he's yet another 100+ yard game on the ground, 33 carries. The dude's an absolute workhorse, and he should be number 1 in a lot of people's Heisman ballots right now. I don't think there's many people beating him out right now. But that conversation is going to be interesting here in the next couple of months. Can Ashton Gianti keep it up? Or will the likes of, Travis Hunter, show up? Boise State keeping my parlay alive. Heck yeah. That's good. Good. Make that money. But yeah, Boise State showed out for the majority of that game. And I do expect them to continue, and I do expect to see them in the college football playoff at the end of the year. Our other Friday game was honestly, you see the score and it's like, oh, it was actually kind of high scoring. Yes, but it was kind of ugly between both of these teams. It was USC and Rutgers. USC won 42-20. USC moved to 4-4, 2-4 in the conference. I don't think it did a whole lot of good in ensuring, what Trojan fans are feeling right now. They thought they were going to come into the Big Ten and actually be pretty damn competitive, be in that top 4, top 5. They have really, really let people down this year, and I think a lot of that has to do with Lincoln Riley. I don't think Lincoln Riley is going to be staying there too much longer past this year, especially if you look at, some of the remaining schedule, and they play Washington, they play Nebraska, they play UCLA, and then they play Notre Dame. There's a chance where they can maybe finish 6-6. I could see them finishing 5-7 with only picking up 1 more win. They're not a great football team. They are not as good as I don't think anybody thought they were going to be. What are your thoughts on USC Rutgers? I think Rutgers basically lost all their energy especially after that Nebraska game, because they came in pretty hot. And ever since, the Nebraska game, they have been 0-4 ever since. So what are your thoughts on Rutgers USC?
I mean, touching briefly on USC, I saw the comments saying they've underwhelmed this season. I mean, by a lot, which we've seen teams that have lost star quality players because, you had Caleb Williams, you had star quality offense, and you lost a lot of players. A lot of players graduated. There's a lot of turnover and moving to a new conference. That's a really tough situation to be in. Their record isn't awful, obviously. They've definitely pulled some games off. They've looked okay in some decently competitive games. But for who they are regarded as and for who their coach is regarded as and how much the dude is paid, they have looked awful, super underwhelming. And I don't see that changing. I really don't. I see them maybe making a bowl game. I definitely think they could get that sixth win, but I think it's going to be a fight to get that sixth win. I really do. They're not going to get that sixth win easy because Big Ten games, there's no gimme. There really isn't a gimme in the Big Ten. Now, you've seen teams get blown out, obviously. Nebraska, Indiana. You've seen teams, got to shout that out a little bit at least. You've seen teams obviously get blown out, but there's usually a lot of competitiveness and closeness, even if the score doesn't show that in a Big Ten matchup. So USC could get that sixth win and make a bowl game, but that's going to be it. That's their ceiling, in my opinion. Moving on to the Rutgers. First of all, I made a terrible call last week. I said that Indiana was about the same caliber team as the Rutgers, and that's just that was maybe first episode of the show, and that's by far going to hopefully that's going to be my worst call because that was a terrible call. Indiana is a legit team. Even with their star quarterback out, they're a legit team, so that's how you know they're legit. Rutgers have lost steam. You said it best. After their game against Nebraska, they fizzled out. And before the Nebraska game, they looked like a legitimate team that was maybe going to go on a little bit of a push this season and get like a 9-win season, possibly. I don't see that now. No. Again, this is another team that is a 6-7 win team max, in my opinion. And they had now USC didn't have the same steam, in my personal opinion, that the Rutgers had in the beginning of the season. But the Rutgers had steam. The Rutgers looked solid. And then they played Nebraska. That wasn't the best game, but Nebraska definitely came up and tired them. I think that we ran them down. That was a game where we ran them down. You know, the energy of Memorial Stadium. You've been there a time or two. So there's a lot of factors there, and they just have not been the same team since. And so I just feel like this entire rest of the season for them is just going to be an uphill climb for both of these teams. So like you said, the score was obviously a higher scoring game, but it was an awful game. It was a terrible game. Just awful played football. I only watched bits and pieces of it. I was watching the Lakers game. I was watching some California sports that were actually going well last night. But I mean, in the end, it was I don't know. It didn't feel like that as big of a victory as it was. It felt like it was a close, really close, poorly fought football game. And I feel like USC is going to have some games where they're getting blown out for the rest of the season. Not all of them, obviously, but they're going to have a couple blowouts or just tough losses. They've got a schedule.
It's incredible how disjointed a team with as much talent as anybody. They have as much talent as anybody when it comes to 4 and 5 stars going to their school, and they're putting out a product like that, like they have this season or the last couple of seasons. And that's a team that should be competing for national championships, conference championships. They are not. And that's why, like, even if they make it to a bowl game, if they finish 6-6, or heck, if they finish 5-7 and only win, one more game the rest of the year, Lincoln Riley is going to get canned. I have no doubt about it. Even if there's a little bit of a buyout, I'm pretty sure the boosters are going to cover that buyout in a pretty big way to get him out of there. They've got money. They can go hire Coach Cignetti or something from Indiana, because Coach Cignetti is what he's proven to be, a proven winner. He is a proven winner. He Went from James Madison, brought his coaching staff. We'll touch on Indiana here in a little bit more, but he brought his coaching staff, brought 27 players from James Madison, and look at what they're doing in Indiana. They have won every single game by multiple scores. They really have yet to be punched in the mouth too much, and they're very disciplined. They don't commit penalties too often. And they just stay within their game, and they are good at it. We'll see how good they are, with Kyle Rourke being out. But that would be a good coaching candidate. If I were USC, I would probably have Coach Signetti on the phone and maybe offer him. But yeah, USC is an ultimate disappointment this year. We'll see how they finish the year out as we go on the next few weeks. Moving on to our Saturday 11 a.m. slate, we've got a very big game. We've got number 12 Notre Dame and number 24 Navy. For whatever reason, ESPN Bet has Notre Dame as a 14-point favorite. It's just making people bet on Navy. What are your thoughts on this game? And what's your ultimate prediction? I think Navy is going to give Notre Dame everything they've ever wanted and more. And I wouldn't be shocked if Navy pulled this one off.
Oh, absolutely. Navy is the team that can do that, in my personal opinion. Navy is the team we touched on them last episode. They are a team that could go on a really deep run because post this Notre Dame game, yes, they have a really intense historic matchup in their final game of the season, but those games leading up to that, they could dog walk those games and win them. Obviously, you can't sleep in college football, but I think they could easily win out the rest of their season. But this Notre Dame game is a tough one. This Notre Dame one is by far their toughest matchup. This is their toughest remaining matchup of the season for regular season, in my personal opinion. Again, you have that historic matchup at the end of the season against a team that is still currently ranked, but the question is how long will that remain for that team? But back to this game, I will be completely honest. I definitely think Navy can pull it off. Navy is a battle-tested team. Navy proved last week. Of course, it wasn't as high caliber of a team as Notre Dame, but they proved that they can win and win big. And I think that they will go shot for shot, punch for punch with Notre Dame. I think it'll be an extremely close game, but I do think that Navy pulls away and wins 31-21 in the end.
That's a great prediction. I also have Navy in this one. I've got it a little bit closer. I've got Navy winning 28-24. I think the minus 14 spread is a little bit too much. When I first saw that number come out at some of the sports books, I was kind of in shock. Basically wondering if anybody at any of the respected sports books have seen Navy play. Navy's good. Navy's a good team. They could win the American Conference this year as well as Army. Army is a really good team too. But Notre Dame, I don't think they are 14 points better than Navy. This is a heck of a lot closer than that. And I mean, this is a team that a few weeks ago lost to Northern Illinois at home. So what Notre Dame team are we going to get? Are they going to overlook Navy at all? That's the big question. Plus, it's at 11 a.m. I think, the stadium at Navy or MetLife Stadium is going to be rocking. So, yeah, give me Navy 28-24. I think they run the ball for, 250 to 300 yards against that Notre Dame front. Moving on to our next game, we touched on Coach Signetti earlier. Number 13 Indiana versus Washington. College game day is there. I think in part to Lee Corso. I think he's going to announce he's retiring, which would be kind of fitting being at Indiana. But this game's on BTN at 11 a.m. Indiana is currently a 5.5-point favorite, which is in a way kind of shocking to me. Just seeing how Indiana has played some of their opponents. But again, Curtis Rourke, excuse me, is out. He had surgery on his thumb. What's your prediction on this game for Indiana and Washington?
Well, again, I mean, we touched on it briefly when we talked about the Rutgers USC game. I had predicted they'd be about the same caliber team, specifically after our matchup with them, with the Rutgers. But obviously, Indiana is one of the best teams in the Big Ten. I think they have a really good chance of finishing one of the top 4 teams in the Big Ten for sure, without a not I don't want to say without a doubt, because again, there's plenty of the season left and the Big Ten is a competitive conference. But they definitely have proven that they're ready to go and they're ready to finish the season out strong. And Washington is also having a really tough transition. Talk about a team that's having a tough transition. A lot of these teams that are coming to the Big Ten are having a tough transition. Is it as tough as a USC? I don't know. I would say not, but it's definitely not like an Oregon. It's not an Oregon transition at all. Oregon is having a seamless transition, but that's just because, I mean, that's Oregon for you. But what I will say is this: Washington is not a terrible team by all means. They are definitely a competitive team that can make an extremely exciting game. But I honestly have to say I think that Indiana is going to win 42-14. I think Washington is going to score. Maybe I can see them bumping that up to 17. Maybe they knock on a field goal. But I think it's going to be a 42-17 win, and I really think that Indiana proves that they're – I mean, again, Washington is not a top-end best team in 10, but if they can win, if they can continue this streak and continue to be one of the only undefeated teams left, that goes to show that they're the real deal. So give me Indiana 42-14-17.
That's a good pick. I've got Indiana in this one, 31-21. I think Washington will come out and fight early. I do think even without Curtis Rourke, I think Indiana is going to do enough in the explosive passing game to get past Washington. So I've got them 31-21, and they're hoping to have Curtis Rourke back next week. So we'll see how he looks if he comes back. Our next game at 11 a.m. is Nebraska and Ohio State on Fox. It's the big noon kickoff game this week. The big question for this game: what Nebraska team's going to show up? Because I don't think anybody expected that Nebraska team to show up last week. Indiana is not 50 or 49 points better than Nebraska. Nebraska just did not show up whatsoever. And here's the thing, Nebraska is a 26-point underdog going into this week. The big question is, will an angry Nebraska team show up? Will they make it competitive for a half? Will they steal possessions away from Ohio State by taking time off the clock, or will this Nebraska team fold? The Ohio State team on the other side, 2 weeks ago, lost to Oregon in a terrible manner. Will Howard should have had more clock sense than that. Plus, there's a new rule that's been made, about the 12-man or 12 people on the field on one side, taking time off the clock. But Ohio State had 2 weeks to marinate over their loss against Oregon. This is a very interesting game. Even after last week, I think this could be a statement game to basically see where your team is at. If Nebraska comes out and plays like I think everybody thinks they can, if they can pull off a performance like Colorado, I'm not saying they're going to beat Ohio State. They can make it competitive for 2 or 3 quarters. If Iowa can make it competitive for 2 quarters with their anemic offense, Nebraska can make it competitive for 2 quarters as well. And I think they will make it competitive for 2 quarters. The question is, what will they do beyond the 2 quarters? Because Ohio State has one of the best rosters in college football. My big keys for Nebraska: they've got to stop the big play. They can't allow the big play to gash them this week like they did last week. Number 2, on offense, they've got to stay ahead of schedule. If you can find a way to get Dylan Raiola in rhythm and get 4 to 5 yards per play attempt and take time off the clock, Nebraska's going to be in this game for a long time. Now on the other side, Ohio State. Ohio State has to play sure defense. I think they're going to be playing a base front. Nebraska's got to try to play that base or beat that base front. And then on offense, Ohio State's offense doesn't need anybody to introduce them. I mean, they've got a lot of weapons. So they got to try and pick apart Tony White's 3-3-5, which hopefully Tony White has a game plan this week. My score is going to be Ohio State 38, Nebraska 21. I think Nebraska keeps it close for about 2.5 quarters. I think Ohio State's talent pulls away. What are your thoughts on Nebraska, Ohio State?
First of all, we're lucky Ryan's not here right now. I mean, maybe he is, and he's just choosing to wait to comment. But if he is not here yet, we are lucky because we were very confident last week, which I think it wasn't ridiculous to be confident last week. We were playing extremely highly competitive football. Last week was by far the least competitive game I've seen all season out of us, top to bottom as an entire team, for a number of reasons. I don't see us having 2 games like that back to back. I really, truly don't. I really think we are a better football team than that. Ohio State is coming off of a loss and a frustrating one. And Ohio State also, yes, I think they're second or third right now in the polls. But in my personal, and maybe they're fourth. I know they're in the top 5. But in my personal opinion, they're one of the more beatable looking teams in that top 10. I really think somebody could definitely catch them. And Oregon, obviously, in my opinion, just is a better football team because Oregon currently is number 1, and I can definitely see that remaining the case for the rest of the season. But I just think there's some holes. There's definitely some holes that Ohio State has shown that can be exposed. And I definitely think that Nebraska will be able to keep it competitive 2 quarters. I definitely think we can keep it competitive for a half. I can definitely see us going into a half like maybe 14-28, 14-21. We're down a score or 2, but it's a decently competitive game. I have us losing about, honestly, like 21-42. I think we will score our most points in the first. Could we score all 3 touchdowns in the first? Absolutely, we could. We've seen the Huskers start super hot and then fizzle out. And that's been a thing for so many different coaches, so many different scenarios. It's not just a this season thing. I mean, we've definitely seen that. What I will say is, could the Huskers keep it closer? Absolutely. But I don't see Notre Dame. I don't see Ohio State scoring less than 42. I definitely think Ohio State is going to run the score up on us, and it's going to be 42 plus. But I think the Huskers could also score more. There's definitely a chance that the Huskers could make it more like a 42-28 or 42-31 type game, and that's a respectable loss. You don't like seeing a loss, but you don't want to see a 56-7. You don't want to see a loss like that.
No. Well, and like you were saying, Ohio State's defense has things that you can easily, find holes that Nebraska can exploit. They love running majority zone coverage. If Satterfield can actually get off of his high horse and actually call plays with quick developing routes and get Dylan in rhythm, allow the receivers to make, yards after catch, I think Nebraska can have a pretty decent game today. But Satterfield hasn't called a complete game this year. And that's the most agitating part. The excuse me. Going into this week, they had their press conferences for game week, and one of the reporters was like, what yards per play would you like? Which yards per play puts into perspective of all the plays that you lose yards, so your sacks, your tackles for loss, all that, plus all your bigger plays. And Satterfield was like, I don't know, anywhere between 4 to 6. Well, 4 yards per play in college football would literally put you at the bottom of college football in terms of offense. You're talking Kennesaw State bad. That would have literally put you at like 131 out of 132. Meanwhile, you've got teams like Ohio State or, Alabama coming out and they're, averaging 6 points, 7 points a play, or 7 yards, 7 yards a play. So, again, I think this is a big game for Satterfield to kind of get back on track if he was on any sort of track at all. He needs to call a game like he did against Colorado. They need to come out kind of the similar game plan that they did for Colorado. They need to come out angry like they did against Colorado. And I think this could be a closer game than most everybody thinks, because nobody, especially after last week, is giving Nebraska much of a chance. And Nebraska needs to take advantage of that narrative. They are on national television. Nobody's giving them a chance. Gus Johnson and Klatt are not going to give Nebraska any sort of chance this week. They're going to be all over Ohio State. Gus Johnson is a closet anybody who is not or who is playing Nebraska fan. Like, you rarely hear him say anything good about Nebraska. So, again, Nebraska needs to play within themselves. They need to play disciplined, complementary football. And I think this game has potential to maybe go down to the wire. Who knows? We'll see starting at 11 a.m.
That would be, if we saw like a game where we're looking at a field goal wins it, or overtime, or something exciting, something that gets people talking. That would get people talking about Nebraska again. That would obviously, even if we lose that, I mean, obviously losing a game, even if it's a competitive one-score game, when you're a team that has lost as many like one-score close games as us, isn't as exciting. But Ohio State is a top 5 ranked team, and after just losing to a team such as Indiana, it'd be a really big boost for the Huskers for the rest of the season, and we need that. So I definitely think they can make it happen. I think it'll be competitive. I really like the analysis of the first quarter or first half to 2.5 quarters, it being close and then them pulling away, because I really think that realistically is what's going to happen. But there's this little level of belief that we can make it closer, and a loss to Indiana because of who Matt Rule is. I think people have to remember that our coach is not Scott Frost anymore. Scott Frost, after a loss like we had, I mean, that was essentially the season. Usually we would really lose all steam if we had any losses, like such a blowout. That was usually that, and that we had plenty of those under him. We also had plenty of one-score losses under him. So there was just a lot of sloppy football, and there wasn't a lot of cleaning up between weeks, and I don't feel like there was a lot of accountability that Scott Frost held over, and I don't know. I mean, I wasn't in the locker room. There definitely could have been, but they didn't play like it. So I feel like Matt Rule is a far better coach to lead a team back to the right way for the rest of a season. So I think we'll see a better Nebraska, but obviously after last week there's some concerns because that was a really rough loss and that really put us in a tough spot. And obviously we'll talk more Husker football later, but who knows? I mean, obviously we both see it being about a 20-ish point loss, maybe a little bit less, but it could be a closer game, especially if the Huskers start on the right foot, because that was the worst part about Indiana. We just started with the worst momentum and continued it and never woke up.
It just snowballed. It all started after that kickoff, after Indiana went out and scored on their opening drive.
Right when I turned it on, that happened.
And Ja'Cory Barney, and I get what he was trying to do. He was trying to catch the ball out of bounds with a foot inbounds because that would have given Nebraska the ball on the 35 because it would have been kickoff out of bounds. That kick might have been going out of bounds anyway, and I wouldn't have touched it. At the very worst, it would have gone into the end zone and you would have had a touchback or you would have been starting at the 25. So, yeah, starting that game off at the 1-yard line was the worst thing Nebraska could have ever done for itself. And it was a momentum play. Had Nebraska started on the 25, you're talking about a scripted, offensive drive that probably would have led to points.
Mm-hmm. Whole different ball game. Possibly.
It would have been it could have been a whole different ball game last week, but it all started with that, and it just kind of snowballed from there. And that's what happens when you've got a lot of veteran players that have been in a lot of these games. They have that losing mentality. Now, most of the young guys that Nebraska has now haven't been around, for all these blowouts. So this is like their first taste of what it's like to get punched in the mouth like that. So I think we're going to see a pretty hungry Nebraska team this week, and I think they're going to make it pretty competitive, at least for 2 or 3 quarters. But if they can make it competitive longer than that and maybe give themselves a shot, I'll take that too. I think we all would, especially after last week. We'll talk more on Nebraska here in a little bit. Let's move on to our 2:30 portion of the slate. We got the number 20 Illinois fighting Illini, going to Eugene, Oregon, playing the number 1 Oregon Ducks. This is another, betting number that I did not see coming. Oregon is a 22.5-point favorite over a very much so improved Illinois fighting Illini team. I think this game is going to be hella more competitive. What are your thoughts on Illinois, Oregon?
I mean, like you said, super competitive. I think we're going to see a game that is competitive up until the 4th, and then I do see Oregon taking over. I was really high on Texas last week, and I was like, they're going to finish the season undefeated. So I feel as if I should be a little less sure about that, and I shouldn't make a call about that and say another team is going to finish undefeated. But I do really think that Oregon has one of the better chances of doing that, and I think that they continue that quest today. But what I will say is Illinois is a solid football team. They're ranked. Shout out to the Big Ten. Obviously, it's grown exponentially, but the teams that have already been in there, not the teams that have been added in this expansion, the teams that have been in there have been growing and showing signs of being, I think this is the most top 25 ranked Big Ten teams we've seen in a while. I could be wrong, but there are a lot of teams that are looking nice from the Big Ten, and most of them are teams that have already been in there, not from that expansion. So shout out to that. There's growth in the Big Ten with those teams. Illinois is, I think they're gonna lose this one, but it's gonna be a competitive game. Give me Oregon winning 31-21, somewhere in that range, somewhere in that range.
I was kind of teetering, on either side of this game. I'm not saying Illinois is going to win, but I think they're going to easily cover. But this could be potentially my upset pick of the week. just based on how Oregon's played some decent football as of late. But, they showed earlier in the season that they could get exposed. Illinois' offense is pretty good. Their quarterback, Luke Altmaier, is very solid too. 120 for 182, 1,506 yards, 15 touchdowns to one pick. So he's very efficient. Same could be said about Dylan Gabriel. He's 174, 226, 2,080 yards, 15 touchdowns, and 4 picks. Oregon relies on the big play potential of their offense. Illinois' defense is predicated on limiting big plays. Also, Luke Altmaier and Illinois' offense has the opportunity to potentially get a few decent chunk plays. I think this game is going to be really close. I do still think Oregon pulls it out. Give me Oregon 31-28. This game is going to be a heck of a lot closer than people think. I would not be shocked if Illinois were to pull it off because, I don't know, Oregon could sleepwalk into this one.
And that is one thing that Oregon has really not, I don't want to say had a history, but they have definitely sleptwalked before, and that has cost them games. And I don't think Illinois is a team that you can sleepwalk for like a quarter of the game or most of the game and then wake up in the end. I think they'll punish you for that. But one thing we need to say about Illinois is once they clear this game, I mean, the rest of their schedule, obviously Minnesota has proven that they're not the worst team ever, but they're not the best team ever either. And then you've got Michigan State, and then you've got the Rutgers, and then you've got Northwestern. So if you can clear past Oregon, you might win out the rest of your season, and then you're looking at a possible bid in the Big Ten championship potentially, and maybe a surprise playoff spot. I don't think that's going to happen because I mean, if they lose to Oregon today, that ends that bid right there. Even if they win out the rest of their season, I don't see them becoming a top 12 team if they lose to Oregon today. But if you win against Oregon today, you're boosting your stock quite a bit because Oregon is that number one team, and that would be back-to-back weeks that number one team dropped. So that would be crazy. I don't see that happening, though.
Here's a crazy thing. The last time Oregon was ranked number one going into a game week, they lost. So
yeah,
it could happen. I'm still saying Oregon pulls it out 31-28. But I do think Illinois is going to come out with a game plan to be competitive. And I think they will be competitive. I think this game's going to be way more competitive than anybody could think. And I think that would make the people over in Champaign pretty happy seeing number 20 Illinois going toe-to-toe with the number 1 Oregon Ducks. Moving on to another pretty big game in terms of the SEC. 2:30 on ABC. You've got the number 21 Missouri Tigers going up against the number 15 Alabama Crimson Tide. It's been a while since I've said Alabama at number 15, but here we are. Big game, man. What are your thoughts on this one?
They might be even lower since we did this episode. I'm not entirely sure. I know they're at 15 at least, but they might even be a tiny bit lower than that at this point. Either way, they've not been this low in a minute. It's definitely not because they've had an absolutely terrible season where they've lost 3-4 games, but they have lost 2 games now, and they definitely look like an extremely beatable team. Missouri, on the other hand, also, I mean, they're a team that's up there in the rankings. Obviously, they're a ranked team again. We've seen them be a team that's been out of the rankings. They've fallen out within the last few years, so they really look like a solid team, a solid unit again. What I will say is this. I think they're going to turn their season around, Alabama, in a game like this, and they're going to win it. What I will say is I don't see it being a huge blowout victory. I do think that it's going to be a decently close game in the first half, but then I think the second half is going to belong to Alabama. I think I definitely can see Missouri making it competitive longer, but I just think that they're going to run out of steam. And I think Alabama, coming off of that loss against Tennessee, is going to be ready to put on a show. And so I think Alabama is going to win 38-21. Obviously, that score is a little bit farther than a super close game, like I alluded to, but I think it is going to be a closer game than that score shows. And I think it's going to be close until, again, I think that first half is going to be super close, and then I think Alabama pulls away. But what I will say is, even with this win, I still have Alabama losing. I think, is it LSU? I had them losing either Missouri or LSU. I think it's LSU who they play. Either way, whoever they play, I believe it's LSU for their remaining schedule. I think they drop that game. So I still think Alabama finishes with 3 losses and is not going to make the playoffs. But I don't think that loss comes against Missouri. I just don't. So what are your thoughts on this game? Can Alabama pull it off? And do you think they're going to maybe have a chance at the playoffs still?
I I do think they could pull this game off, but I think Missouri. I think Missouri is going to beat Alabama today. I think it's going to be competitive. I've got Missouri today 28-24. Missouri's got a lot of big playability. Alabama's defense has looked suspect, giving up a lot of big plays as of late. And I think Missouri's going to exploit that a little bit. And I do think Missouri's defense is going to get stops when they need to. Um, I've got Missouri, man, 28-24. And going into bye week before they play LSU, that LSU game becomes huge for Alabama if they want to stay in any sort of conversation. But if they lose this week and next week at LSU or in 2 weeks against LSU, you're talking a 5-4 team. Yeah, there's no way. No way you're getting into the playoff. You're probably going to be a candidate for the Detroit Bowl at the end of the year. But
Man,
yeah, I've got Missouri. Alabama is not a great team. They are not a great team. They are very disjointed. They are one of the most penalized teams in the country. Um, they're not very disciplined. So I'm going to tip my hat and, give the benefit of the doubt to the more disciplined team in the Missouri Tigers. I think Missouri has something to prove, that they're well in the race for the SEC championship game. And yeah, they're just a dangerous team. They got exploited up against number 11 Tennessee, which, if I were to compare teams, number 11 Tennessee and number 21 Missouri are very similar in how they want to run their teams. So, yeah, give me Missouri with the edge. I think they're a little bit more of the proven commodity this year. Moving on to our next game, we've got the number 5 Texas Longhorns, and this is weird for me to say, the number 25 Vanderbilt Commodores. Who would have thought that this would have been a top 25 matchup going into Saturday? It's at 3:15 p.m. on the SEC Network. What do you think, man? Vanderbilt is probably going to be rocking for this one with number 5 Texas coming into town. Do you think Vandy has potential for another top 5 upset this year, or do you think Texas takes care of business and kind of moves along?
Well, I think Texas takes care of business. Vanderbilt obviously is in that conversation of being a top 30 team, and they're definitely proven. They're a proven team for sure. I think the one issue I have with them pulling off another victory against a top 5 team is I just don't see that happening against Texas, because they're a more proven team than Alabama, and they've played far better football than Alabama throughout the season. Obviously, last week is an exception of that, but I think Texas pulls it off. And not only do they pull it off, I think they have their, call it a bounce back victory, I suppose, if you want. I don't think this would be a good example of that because it's Vanderbilt and they're a team that's teetering. I mean, after this, I think they'll be knocked out of the top 30. Maybe they won't. Maybe they'll be right around 30, but I think they'll be closer to like a 38 to 45 team if they drop to Texas. And I think they are going to drop to Texas. I think Texas pulls it off. Now, I definitely, had we had the show going on during the Alabama Vanderbilt game, probably would not have picked Vanderbilt to win it, to be completely honest with you. So, looking at the game from that lens and from the lens of actually Vanderbilt is a really solid team this season, they are a better team than they have been, and they are playing extremely high level football. It could be a closer game. Vanderbilt could definitely keep it. I think it's only going to be close for the first quarter. I think Vanderbilt's going to score most of their points early on. If they're only scoring 10, then that's a touchdown and a field goal. So I would give them a touchdown early and then maybe a field goal a little bit mid game. I don't see them going above that, but could they score closer to 21, 24 points? Possibly. I don't see Texas scoring below 40. I think Texas wins 42 to 10. Maybe Vanderbilt pushes it up to 17, 21 points, but give me Texas. I think this is their game to get back on track, and then I think they finish the season, and I don't see them picking up another L. They definitely have a schedule they could pick up at least one more for sure, but I think Texas definitely finishes the season strong and gets back on track with a W today.
I could see that happening. I've got Texas as well. I do think Vanderbilt is going to make it a little bit closer than people think. It's 17.5 point spread right now. And I do think Vanderbilt can keep it within 17 points. I think their defense is predicated on causing havoc, creating havoc on the quarterback, and forcing turnovers. I do think Vanderbilt can force a couple of turnovers in this game to kind of make things a little bit more interesting. But at the end of the day, I've got Texas winning 42 to 24. I do think Vanderbilt has what it takes to put up a few scores this game and keep it relatively competitive. But yeah, Vanderbilt, what a story they've been this year. After the last few years and not being very competitive, and they've been a bottom feeder in the conference, to now they're 5-2, one win away from bowl eligibility. Quite the story. We'll see what happens at 3:15 today if Vanderbilt has what it takes to maybe take down the mighty number 5 Longhorns.
Be shocked. I
On
really
the
would
SEC
be.
network. I would be shocked too, but I was also shocked when they took down Alabama.
Oh man,
So
too. I did not see that coming. I definitely, again, because Alabama, I believe, is a more they're not a very disciplined team. And
no.
some of that is they have a lot of younger players, sophomores and below, and a lot of that is talent that is going to develop. Now, if that's talent that stays at Alabama after this season, possibly not, depending on if they fizzle out and have a really weak finish. But either way, Alabama is not a very disciplined team. Texas, in my personal opinion, is proving that they are. Now, this last victory is the exact opposite of that. I kind of, you can't judge a season off of one game. We've seen plenty of great teams that have even gone on to win the national championship that have had terrible games at one point or another throughout the season. But Texas did not play the type of football that has made them so great this season in their last game. But I think Vanderbilt is a team that you can play that brand of football against. I don't think they're going to have their way and like completely dominate the first quarter on again. And your prediction of about a little less than 20-point win for Texas, I can definitely see that happening. I can see Texas being held honest and kept true in this game and not pulling away too much. But again, I can also see Texas having a really, really successful game on both sides of the ball. And I can really only see Vanderbilt on my side staying competitive for the first little bit of the game. But time will tell. If Vanderbilt pulls off another victory against a top 5 team, that would be absolutely insane. I mean, that would be historic, and they would be one of the most exciting teams this season, if not the most exciting team this season to watch.
Yeah, it would be absolutely crazy. It would be absolute pandemonium in Vanderbilt if they pulled it off. Um, moving on to our 6:30 slate, we've got the number 8 LSU Tigers versus going to College Station and playing the number 14 Texas A&M Aggies. Texas A&M is definitely more improved than they have been the last few years under their first year head coach Mike Elko. And then LSU under Brian Kelly has looked pretty good. They're ranked number 8. They're 6-1. What are your thoughts? I think the 12th man at Texas A&M is ready. I think they're going to rattle LSU a little bit. What are your thoughts on this one?
I think it's possible. I definitely think LSU is ready for it. I think this is LSU's most legitimate team they've had since Joe Burrow. I think they're going to prove their legitimacy and finish out. I believe they're 8th currently. I know the polls have switched up even since we last made our lineup, but I believe they're 8th.
They are.
So I think LSU has a really, really, really good shot at having a really successful rest of their season and possibly finishing in the top 5 to 6 teams when it's all said and done. Texas A&M has proven that they are a competitive team. They've been a really up and down team that's been really inconsistent the last few seasons. They've had really good seasons that have really subpar seasons. This season, they've had a really, really solid year overall. This is one of their better seasons that they've had. But what I will say, I think LSU is better. Obviously, going to Texas A&M, I mean, that is one of the toughest places to play. And this game determines if Texas A&M breaks into the top 12 or if LSU falls out of the top 12. So this is literally a matchup that determines playoff seeding, and we're getting closer to the playoffs. Obviously, we're not within the last few weeks where we're really going to be talking about that and looking at that, but talk about it getting closer and closer and closer and going down to the wire. So speaking of that, I've got this game doing exactly that. Give me LSU winning by a field goal, 27-24 in a mid-scoring game. Obviously 20-plus points is not a low-scoring game, but when you're not breaking 30, it's not a high-scoring game either. So it's a decently competitive shot-for-shot game, and give me LSU winning by a field goal.
I could see that happening for sure. I think one of the last times that these two teams have played, it was that amazing multiple overtime game where I think it was LSU that pulled it off. It was like 72 to something. It was crazy high scoring. I don't see that happening. I do think it's going to be close. But give me Texas A&M. I think Texas A&M having the home field advantage. I think the 12th man is going to be ready for LSU. Could rattle them a little bit. Give me A&M 27-24.
I mean, that's possible. It could go either way. It's a flip of a coin game, honestly.
It's literally a coin flip. Right now, Texas A&M is a 1-point favorite. It's literally a coin flip game. It is a pick'em, a practical pick'em game. So that should be a fun one to watch at 6:30 on ABC. I believe Kirk Herbstreit and Chris Fowler will be on the call for that one, so it should be fun listening to both of them call that game. Moving on to another 6:30 game, we've got number 3 Penn State going up against Wisconsin. Wisconsin has beat up the last 3 teams that they played, but the 3 teams that they've played have also sucked. Penn State's a little bit more battle tested, in my honest opinion. Maybe a little bit overrated, but they are ranked number 3. What are your thoughts on this game? Do you think Penn State has what it takes to go into Camp Randall and pull one out against the Badgers?
Well, what I will say is this. The fact that they have to go to the Badgers and the Badgers have that momentum built up from some really big beat ups in the last couple of games. That is a really big disadvantage to Penn State. Yes, Penn State is a top 4 ranked team, but honestly, give me Wisconsin. And we're going to call it an upset just because obviously with Penn State being a top 4 ranked team, that'd probably be considered an upset. But I definitely think Wisconsin is playing proven football, and I think they're going to show that even more today. So give me Wisconsin winning. It's going to be a close one. It's not going to be a blowout. I think they're going to win by 1 score. Give me Wisconsin 35-28.
I've got Penn State by 2 scores.
Okay.
I don't think Wisconsin's as proven. They've beat up on 3 teams that are pretty beat up in general. So I've got Penn State. Give me Penn State 34-21. I think it's going to be decently competitive for a while, but I do think Penn State will pull it out. And I believe Penn State Ohio State is next week. So if both Ohio State and Penn State take care of business today, that's a very big game next week. And I believe it's in Happy Valley. So Penn State will be rocking for that game when it all is said and done. Now we'll go into our upset specials. Our upset special games. Kick us off, man. What are your thoughts on this first matchup?
So first, we're going to look at BYU versus UCF. And first of all, UCF has been a pretty underwhelming team this year. Obviously, they've dropped games to teams like Colorado, which Colorado has talent, but they're not a top 20. I mean, they've yet to be a top 25 team this season. I think there's a slight chance they could break into the top 25, but they're not going to make it above 21, 22, in my opinion, for the season, if even there. But UCF is a better team than how they've played, and I think today is their day. BYU is playing incredible football, undefeated, but they have proven, especially in their last game, that they are definitely a beatable team. And in my personal opinion, this UCF team is better than that Oklahoma State team that they almost lost to. So I think UCF wins. I think it's an upset. I think it's going to be close, but I think UCF pulls away in the final and wins 21-31.
I like that pick. I really do like that pick. I also have UCF beating BYU today. I've got it a little bit closer. I do think UCF wins 28-24. BYU last week showed that they could be potentially beat. They've shown it a few times, yet they have yet to be beat. They're 7-0. But I do think this is the week that they do get upset. And I do think UCF Stadium is going to be rocking for this game. So
it has to be, because at this point they've had too many disappointing games this season not to show up and try to show out and stop a team. I mean, BYU is going for an undefeated bid, and if they don't, and I mean, I don't think they're going to pull it off no matter if they win this game today or not. But you want to stop that. Anytime you're going up against an undefeated team and you're having a rough season and you don't have that much, I mean, they're playing for a bowl game still, obviously, but anytime you're having a disappointing season, when you can rain on someone's undefeated parade, that's a plus. So I see UCF doing. Our next matchup is Kansas versus Kansas State. Kansas State currently ranked in the top 20. Kansas is having a rough season. Kansas is 1-6, I believe, currently.
2-5.
2-5. There we go. 2-5. So not quite as rough, but still not much better. A one game improvement. But what I will say is they've lost a lot of close games, a lot of extremely close games. They've had a lot of disappointing moments and really game defining plays that have gone not in their favor, and they've lost a lot of close games. So what I will say is, in their defense, as Nebraska fans, we know how that feels to lose a 1-score game or to lose a really close game because of a few different factors that happen throughout the game. And that's the type of team that Kansas is. So I think Kansas State clears it. I think Kansas isn't going to stand a chance. I don't think this is going to be an upset. I think Kansas State is going to win 42-10.
Kansas State has won the last 15 games in this series. Kansas is hoping to end that. I do think Kansas State showed some things that they can be exploited by. I do think Kansas has the weapons to exploit those things on Kansas's defense or Kansas State's defense. What the hell? I'm going to go with Kansas today. I think they are going to end the 15-game losing streak against Kansas State. They played very well against an albeit Houston team, but I think they needed a game like that to kind of get back on track, especially after losing all these other very close games. And as a Nebraska fan, it kind of hurts to say because Nebraska's also lost a lot of them. But they lose to Arizona State by one score, 35-31. They lose to TCU 38-27. They lose to West Virginia 32-28. They lose to UNLV 23-20. Like, you're talking very close games. So they're right there against all these teams. They've got the talent. I do think Kansas comes in hungry, and I do think they pull off the Big 12 upset to move to 3-5 on the year and maybe get a little bit closer to bowl eligibility at the end of the season.
Okay, so you're calling 2 major upsets today, possibly. Let's go.
Yep.
Maybe 3. We'll see if you're calling this one. I don't know. This is a little rough one. This is the 1-6 team I was thinking of. Florida State. I mean, since game 1, if we're talking about a team that really lost based on momentum just being completely ripped away from them in game 1, that's Florida State. Since game 1, they have had no momentum. They are taking on number 5 or 6 currently, Miami. Miami obviously pulled off that win last week. Like, I believe we both called them to pull that win off. And they played way better football. They looked way better than they did that week before or that game before. So Miami's looking legit. Florida State is looking the exact opposite of legit. As much as I can see this being possibly a game that stays decently close in the beginning, I think Miami is going to open it up. I think Florida State can hang with Miami and play decently competitive football for a quarter and a half. And then I think Miami is going to open it up and finish that second quarter with a score or 2 lead. And then they're just going to open it up in that second half. And I think, honestly, give me 42-17. I do think Florida State can score 17. I really do. I think it's all going to come in a short amount of time. I think they're going to be able to – I think it maybe will all come in the first half. I don't think they'll score 17 in the first quarter, obviously, but I do think they will – I definitely think they can score 17 in the first half or maybe 10 in the first half and then their other 7 in the second. But Miami's going to run with it and finish with 42-plus points. You call another one? Another upset?
It's very tempting.
Do it, bro. Let's do it.
Miami's defense is atrocious. Absolutely atrocious. Let me rattle off some of the defense, the scores that they've given up. They gave up 45 to Louisville. They gave up 38 to Cal. They gave up 34 to Virginia Tech. Though that was the last 3 games. There is a lot Florida State can exploit if they really want to. And I do think with how Florida State is sitting, this is their Super Bowl. Kind of a Deion Sanders quote right there. We're everybody's Super Bowl. But this is Florida State's Super Bowl. I do think Florida State comes out and plays. And, if Miami's defense isn't shored up, they got to watch out. I've got Pats fan, Florida State 35-28. That is actually kind of a similar route that I was going to take. Give me Florida State 38-31. I do think we're going to see another major upset this week. And I do think Florida State comes out hungry, and I think they come out pissed off against their rival Miami.
Man, that'd be three major upsets this weekend. Or did you call a fourth one? I think you just called three.
I called 3.
That would be something. I
I
mean,
I'm just saying I'm not going to be shocked if Florida State beats Miami today just based on like what their defense has done the last 3 against Louisville had a good offense, but Cal, their offense is largely anemic, and then Virginia Tech is largely anemic too. So
yeah, you are right. I
they,
I will say Miami has been exposed even in their victories this season.
yeah, yeah. So I'm gonna push all my chips into the table and say
Man,
Florida State wins.
I three upsets. We're talking like college basketball level upset numbers right there because college football you see upsets, but that many in one at one time,
We're
that's
we're
parity.
we're
I'd love it though. I'd love it. I'm
we're
here for it.
talking October Madness, man.
We
October
are.
Madness. It's
October
not March
Madness for
Madness.
real. It's
Yeah,
October. It would be, but and honestly, I'm here for it. There's no team I'm pulling for in those games for any specific reason. And parity is so exciting and fun in sports, especially at crucial parts in the season. We're at like that midway, extremely crucial part where you can either go up or down, and a lot of teams will continue going up or continue going down post this week.
right.
So it's a huge momentum shifter for the season. And so any loss for these ranked teams against these unranked teams would absolutely be a momentum killer. I will say BYU, I think, would stay in the top 16, and they could maybe still make a push at being a 11, 12, or 10 seed for the playoffs. But I think if Miami, if they obviously lose, will probably only fall down to like, I don't know, Florida State being 1-6, that really hurts your stock a lot. But I don't think they fall out of the top 20. I don't. Maybe they do, but I don't think they've made some exceptions for those teams that have lost this season. But because Florida State is 1-6, I'd be interested to see what that does to their stock. But then a team like Kansas State, if they lose, that there goes their bid for the playoffs. So this is a make or break week for a lot of these teams, and I think it could be a break, and I'm here for it. I hope we pick back up next show and some of these upsets come true because man, you might be 3 for 3, bro. You never know.
Dude, you'd never know, especially this year in college football. There's so much parity
There
going
is.
on. I mean, you look at there's a couple more games that I want to bring up. Since we went through that, whole segment pretty quickly. Um, Here's a game, 6:30 on BTN. We got 4-3 Michigan State going up against 4-3 Michigan. And if we were to have a segment, called the Sicko game segment, I think this game would probably headline it. Because this game has the makings of a very, very sloppy game. Very low scoring. Both of these offenses don't do very much. Both of the defenses are pretty solid. Um, do you have any thoughts on Michigan State, Michigan?
I do. I think both teams are pretty evenly matched this season, honestly, which is not a good thing for either of these teams because Michigan State has obviously not been the best team the last couple of seasons, but Michigan are coming off of a championship. Obviously, you're losing your head coach and you have all that scandal and all that stuff going on, whatever. But looking beyond that, this team is just not the same team and they are not a competitive I don't see them regaining their ranking this season. I really don't. I see them making a bowl game, but I see that being about it. Give me Michigan State winning a close 21-17 matchup.
I've got Michigan State winning this one 13-10.
Ooh, yeah.
I think this one is going to be a sloppy matchup. If you're gonna bet the over under, I would bet the under. The over under right now for this game is 38.5 for the total. So I would bet the under on this one. Both of the offenses are very anemic. Both of the defenses are good. I don't think there's going to be a whole lot for either team to really take advantage of. Plus, it's a rivalry game. So this has potential to be very, very, very low scoring, and I'm here for it. I love defensive football. Going to another game in the ACC at 7 p.m. We've got number 22 SMU 6-1, 3-0 in the ACC against Duke, who is 6-1, 2-1 in the ACC. What are your thoughts on this SMU team? Do you think they have what it takes to move to 4-0 in the ACC, or do you think Duke pulls it off at home?
This game is, I think, one of the most underrated games of the weekend. I think this could be a really exciting game. I think it's going to be a high scoring game. SMU obviously they're kind of a fun team to watch. They've got a fun little stadium. They've got a cool little traditions there. They're kind of a team that they're fun to root for because there's not much to pull for usually, but this season there's a lot to pull for. This season it's not just a team that makes some of these games competitive. This season it's a team that is showing up. So Duke obviously also is having a pretty decent season in certain areas, but give me SMU winning a higher scoring game. I think they're going to win. I think they're going to win by a field goal. Give me give me SMU winning 31-28.
I've got SMU. SMU is a pretty high-powered offense right now. So is Duke to a point, but I do think SMU has a little bit more big play capability. Give me SMU in a close game, 38-35. I think it's going to be decently high scoring for this one. Another game at 9:15 happening in Boulder, Colorado. We've got 5-2 Cincinnati going up against 5-2 Colorado. Both teams are 3-1 in the Big 12. Both teams can really make a statement, being in the race for the Big 12 championship at the end of the year. What are your thoughts on this one?
I think this is the game that defines who Colorado is this season, because I think this is the game that determines which team is going to that Big 12 championship. Obviously, anything could happen to either team the rest of the season. Even if you win tonight, you could lose out. You could have rough games going forward. But I think if you win this game, it really solidifies who you are in the Big 12. And I think it also gives you a push into being ranked. Again, I don't see Colorado being a team that breaks too far into the rankings, but I do think they will be in the top 25 by the end of the season. And I think Colorado pulls it off tonight. I think it will be kind of a sloppier game for both teams earlier on, but I do think it will end in a decent high scoring affair. But I think that I'm going to go with Colorado winning by not quite 2 touchdowns, but they are winning by 2 scores. Give me Colorado pulling off this win 35-24.
I like that pick. I'm also going to pick Colorado in this one. I do think Boulder is going to be rocking tonight.
Stars are going to be out too. They show up. Kevin Durant, Carmelo Anthony. I mean, in Boulder, Colorado, of all places.
Hey, Boulder is a very nice place.
It is.
It is beautiful. But I do have Colorado winning this one 42-24. I do think it'll be close, but I do think Colorado pulls away in the last 2 quarters because I do think Colorado has just too much big play ability for Cincinnati to contain. Going to another game that, was played on Wednesday, but I want to give this team props. Kennesaw State won their first FBS game since joining the FBS from the FCS. They beat Liberty, which is a pretty big upset in Conference USA. You got any thoughts on Kennesaw State? Any congrats to give them? Because that's a big win, big stepping stone for them. Making a big move.
When did they join FBS?
This year. This is their first year.
I mean, that's a pretty big way to start and to go in. I mean, obviously it's a rough transition from one situation to another. It's a whole different level, but congrats to them. I mean, I think you're going to see a program that's probably going to start building a little bit and see some traction. You're not going to see anything too exciting this season, but just getting that started is a huge, huge victory, bigger than just one W on the schedule.
Yeah. Absolutely. The team really needed that to get a little bit more momentum under their belt, just to basically say, "Hey, we can do this. We can be competitive in this conference if we go out and play every week." Um, I do think Kennesaw State will be set up pretty well to, um, compete at a pretty high level. One more game I want to talk about. It is the Boston College Louisville game from Friday. Boston College got up 20 to nothing in the first half and still lost 31 to 27 to Louisville. What happened, man? What
Louisville's a
happened
good
to Boston
team.
College?
Louisville is a really good team. What I will say, I mean, they didn't play like that in the beginning of that game, but a team that can come back like that, obviously, you're not looking at a top 5 ranked team you came back against or even a ranked top 15, but you're looking at a really nice comeback win. And you're looking at a team that had just picked up a loss. And so it's good to kind of bounce back. But they played really weak football in the beginning, and they looked absolutely not like the same team that they finished, but it's not how you start, it's how you finish. And Louisville is a good team. Louisville has top tier talent, and they proved that. They proved that they could come back and not pick up that embarrassing loss, because that would have been an embarrassing loss. Obviously, it's not the worst team you could lose to ever in college football, but you don't want to lose like that. So the fact that they could come back and get kind of a statement win and kind of regain their traction and maybe hopefully finish their season out on a good note, I think that was kind of a statement and a turnaround game for them. But again, can't really call it that too much because of how they played in the beginning.
Right. Well, and I didn't envision Louisville getting down 20 to nothing.
Dude, that me neither.
20 to nothing, man. And they pull out the win, but man, if they played a team with any sort of pulse whatsoever, like a Clemson or a Pitt
That
or
that.
whomever else in the ACC, if they started off 20 to nothing against any one of those teams, it would be over by halftime.
Oh,
Um,
without a doubt.
but yeah, it's kind of crazy. And I see Sports Maniac 445 comment, Liberty sucks.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
They
I think we can agree on that.
they sucked up against Kennesaw State, that's for sure. I'll attribute it to Kennesaw State actually coming out and playing pretty good football too. Um, but yeah, so that should be it for the slate. Let's move on. I believe it's our Husker football segment. Um, Take it away, man. What are your thoughts on the season so far, and maybe few more thoughts for today's game?
I mean, obviously, we were pretty confident in our boys last week. Maybe not winning out the rest of the season, but having a really good chance at, if we could clear Indiana, maybe our only loss was going to be to Ohio State. Obviously, now because of that loss to Indiana, I'm less confident that we can win out, because Wisconsin, like I said, I think they're going to pick up that win against Penn State, and then I think you're looking at a legitimate Wisconsin team. Iowa is not the greatest Iowa team we've seen, but Iowa is competitive, and they obviously we hate each other, and so there's going to be that. So I don't think I cannot say, I got to backtrack. I was going to say there was no way we lose to UCLA and USC. Cannot say that, but I think we steamroll USC. UCLA. I think what happens is, we already talked about this game with Ohio State. I think it's competitive. It's close. We fight. I still think we lose by about 21, maybe slightly under 20 points, possibly. Maybe we keep it more competitive in the second half than I think we will. But then if we lose, I think we play UCLA and we win 42 to 7, 42 to 10, 42 to 13. I think we just have an absolute statement comeback game against UCLA. And then you have USC, and I think that's a beatable team. And then very, very possibly, with that momentum built up in those two games against two new conference teams, going into Wisconsin, it wouldn't be as hard to keep it competitive, keep it close, maybe get that win. I think in our final 4 games, looking past today, I think we're gonna go 3-1. I think I think we're gonna drop Iowa or Wisconsin, and I'm kind of pulling more towards Wisconsin at this point, but I'm not quite there yet. I need to see how this Penn State game goes. If they get dog walked and blown out by Penn State, and we play Ohio State and we keep it close, and we either win or just keep it close, then my opinion's going to look different. So I'll have to revisit that after our both of our games today. But I think Wisconsin is the team that I can see in those final 4. So I think we're going to go either 3-1 or 4-0 in those final 4. But obviously Ohio State, I think we're going to pick that loss up today. I think we're going to play better. We've got to play better. Again, we've got a coach in Rule and a staff. Obviously, there are people, and for good reason, that are frustrated with the coaching staff. But as an entirety, this is the best coaching staff the Huskers have had in a long time. And will they potentially make changes depending on how the rest of the season goes, if needed, going forward, or just look at what that would look like? Maybe. But I think we have a pretty solid group. And I think Rule is a locker room motivator that can get those guys back on track. And I do truly think that Dylan Raiola is going to – he's in today, correct?
Yeah.
I think I don't know. I think because his last 2 games have been decently unproductive, specifically his last one, and just not super successful in a lot of areas – I'm hesitant to say he's going to go out and just have an insane like week 1 or week 2 performance and just go right off the bat. But I think he is. I think he's going to come out ready to go. I think this Husker offense is going to come out guns blazing today. And I think we are going to have a pretty early score that's going to wake Ohio State up a little bit and show them that we're ready to play. So again, I think we pick up the L today, but I definitely think that we go 3-2 in our last 5 games. I don't see us going below that. Could we go 4-1? Possibly, but I think we finish this season 3-2.
Yeah, I think, obviously, I think the odds are leaning toward a loss, obviously, today. But you look past today, next week they play UCLA, which is a winnable game. And it's at home. I think Nebraska is ready to play at home again this year. I do think they make a statement there. I do think USC is a very beatable team. I still think Wisconsin is a beatable team. I think Iowa is a beatable team. You can make an argument of winning any of the games in the last 4 weeks of the year. You can really make a case for Nebraska winning any of the last 4 games. I'm going to say in the last 4 they go 3-1 and I think they drop one, but that would still put them at 8-4 at the end of the year, which I would take.
It gets you a pretty good bowl game.
It would get you to a pretty good bowl game, probably in like Florida or Tennessee. And I would take it. I would honestly take it. But there's also potential there where Nebraska could get on a little bit of a heater, especially if they play well today, and they can finish the season 4-0. And you're talking 9-3. I'm not willing to go that far yet. I want to see how they play today. But last week was a rock bottom type moment for Matt Rule and this staff. And I think this team needed to wake up. I think members of the staff needed to have a little bit of a wake-up call. It's like, hey, the way we're doing things is not right. And I think we heard a lot of that from staff going into this week, in the press conferences and stuff like that, saying, hey, we need to do things different. We need to start executing on the easy things. Because this team has had issues in the last, couple of weeks at executing easy things, simple plays. And Nebraska is predicated on running an RPO-based offense with screens, and those screens won't work unless your wide receivers are attacking and blocking downfield. Well, the big receivers that we got, haven't been doing a great job at blocking on the outside to giving any of our running backs any breathing rooms to make any plays. Also, we can't run the ball simply between the tackles, which is another thought. Last week against Indiana, you're talking first drive in the second half. Nebraska ran tempo. They ran a high tempo system at the start of the second half last week to potentially pull within 2 scores. And they were running and throwing the ball pretty easily on Indiana's defense running tempo. If you can get into a rhythm, run tempo against Ohio State, because you could maybe catch them sleeping a little bit too. I think if that's what you have to do to consistently move the ball and maybe get points, you're not playing possession ball, but whatever you can do to get points, get points. You can't go into Ohio State only scoring 21 points in the last 2 weeks. You can't do that. Like, this is a game where, like, obviously, if Nebraska's offense is showing up, this is a game you hope your defense shows up and makes a couple key stops. Like, this is a game where you're going to need to at least score, I don't know, 35, 40 points if you want any sort of a shot of winning this game. And that falls on Satterfield's play calling. It goes on the execution of the players. The coaching staff, all in told, just needs to put these players in a place to succeed this week. If they don't, we're going to see another example of what'll happen with an unprepared team like last week. It'll be back-to-back blowouts. But if Nebraska shows up, Nebraska's got the talent to, put up a few scores and make it pretty competitive. Like, I could see Nebraska, if they show up, they could score 30 points. They could score 31 points. That would mean Nebraska would have to make a field goal, which I'm not sure about. So maybe I'll up it to 35. Okay.
There we go. That's better.
We'll just go all extra points.
Hey, whatever we need, whatever works.
But like, if Nebraska goes out today and scores, say, 35 points, I'm feeling pretty dang good what Nebraska is in the game. I honestly think I feel really good because Ohio State, while they do have offensive weapons, if Tony White has a good game plan, Nebraska can halt, some of their big play production a little bit. So I could see the game going one or two ways. This team is going to go out totally unprepared and they're going to get run off the field in the first half, or they're going to be here and fight. And I really hope it's the latter. I really do, because I think that could make a statement going into the rest of the season saying, hey, we went toe-to-toe with number 4 Ohio State. Let's go out and make a statement next week against UCLA. And let's go to USC and make a statement there. And you could try and make a statement each of the last 4 games. I think there's room there where Nebraska could finish the season 8-4 to 9-3. I really do.
There's a possibility for sure.
But it's all based on how this team comes out after a game like last week. Because I'm going to tell you this now. Indiana is not 49 points better than Nebraska. They're not. Nebraska just had a terrible ass game plan. And as soon as Nebraska got punched in the mouth, as soon as they gave up that first rushing touchdown that they had all year, it was like someone kicked their puppy and they didn't play with the same energy. They didn't go in with any energy. You need to have energy playing up against number 4 Ohio State. You need to have energy. I mean, you just go back to a few seasons ago with Adrian Martinez when Nebraska went to Columbus and basically took Ohio State to the brink. Nebraska lost that game 36-31. There is room there where Nebraska could take advantage of some of the things that Ohio State loves to do on defense. There really is. There are things to exploit with every team in the country that I think most teams will exploit. So, Ohio State is likely going to win. My prediction, I think, earlier in the episode was like 38-21. I would not be shocked if Nebraska put up more points than that. I wouldn't be shocked if this game was very close going into the fourth quarter. I would not be shocked because I do think we still have a better offense than Iowa. And Iowa lost the game 31-7, and they didn't score that touchdown until I think the fourth quarter. And their quarterback play is arguably way worse. So again, I kind of like, I don't like the result of last week, but I also think that game was kind of the wake-up call that this team needs. This team is way better than 56-7, losing. Way better. This coaching staff is way better than losing 56-7.
Without a doubt.
So it's going to be interesting to see, what happens today and then what transpires, going into the next few weeks. Because they play UCLA and then they have a bye week before they have to go to USC. So hopefully they utilize that bye week before USC and get a pretty good game plan in place, because they're going up against another team at USC that runs the RPO. That hurt Nebraska against Indiana. Ohio State also loves running the RPO. So again, we'll see. I'm going to say Nebraska finishes 3-1 in the last 4 just to be safe. Finish 8-4. Anything better than that, I will gladly take.
Me too. Yeah.
But yeah, I'll gladly eat my crow pie after last week, because like Montana said, we went in pretty confident saying, Nebraska's defense is pretty good. Indiana hasn't really faced, a defense like ours, and our defense goes out with the game plan that it did, and it was pretty much out the window right away.
It was terrible.
It was bad.
It was awful. It was a rough watch.
I immediately went on College Football 25 and put it on freshman mode and put like 300 points in Indiana's defense after that. It was bad.
All you can do. At that point, that's about all you can do. That was a rough one. We both made it didn't seem like a bold prediction, but I guess after that, the way they played, I suppose it was. But they're not going to lose like that today. Ohio State, in my opinion, is a better team than Indiana, top to bottom in a lot of ways. But I also think the Huskers are a better team than they played last week. So before we move on from our Husker segment, we're going to give our kind of mid-season rankings our ratings of the offense and defense, giving them a letter grade. Currently for the Husker defense, because of last week, I'm giving them a C+. I definitely would have had them in the B's and maybe even the A's, but that was a really rough defensive loss. And obviously maybe C+ is kind of lowballing them and they deserve a little bit more love, but I'm giving their defense a C+ at this point in the season. And I'm going to give their offense just a straight up C. We're not going C-. Maybe I should. Maybe I got the rankings all wrong and I should be going higher with the defense, lower with the offense. But we're keeping them both C's, and I'm staying right at a C for the offense. And that might change after today, but I'm going C for offense, C+ for defense. Where do you have our boys at right now?
On defense, I think last week was kind of a fluke.
Okay.
I've got them in a B-. I think at this point in the year, they've been mostly pretty good. Last week, they just went in with a terrible game plan and got exploited on it. And they didn't make great adjustments, so hopefully they do that this week. On offense, I'm largely disappointed in the offense. Coach Satterfield's game plan has sucked. Just to put it politely, the last couple of weeks. And it's disturbing, hearing him talk this week and basically saying he's like, I need to get myself in the mindset to run the ball more. It's like, dude, you should already be in the mindset. You need to have an offense where you can actually run the ball.
Yeah.
Even if it's, getting creative in the run game, trying to get yardage, trying to get players, on the defense out of position. Like, you need to run the damn ball. You can't be one-dimensional, and that's what Nebraska has been the last few weeks. They've been one-dimensional. So, with that being said, the offense, I think, is going to get a D.
Ooh, okay. A D.
I'm just being brutally honest.
A D, no plus, just D?
Just D.
Okay. I think that's
it's a D until proven otherwise. I believe in Dylan Raiola. I believe in him as our quarterback, but I don't believe in our play caller.
No.
Our play caller has left much out. Like his play calls have left a lot of points off of the field.
You've got to match that up too. It's great to have a good quarterback, but especially when you have a good quarterback, you need to match him up with a good, solid play. So yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. That is
it's a big thing.
And that's a huge subtraction from this team's success.
It's a big thing, and if nothing improves as far as the offense goes, I hope Matt Rule makes a move and parts ways with Satterfield, because you need to get someone in here that could coach a top 20 to top 25 offense. Because I'm going to say this, if Nebraska had a top 20 to top 25 offense, Nebraska is likely a top 10 team going into this week and undefeated, because you're talking, a top 25 offense with potential of a top 10 defense. You're talking a shootout game last week rather than a blowout. So we just need consistency, and hopefully we can find some of that consistency going in the next, few weeks after today. Hopefully it starts today. If we can just find consistency, that's the big thing. It's discipline and consistency. If we are disciplined and we are consistent with our play calls, if we can get 5 yards a carry, stick to running the ball, and that'll open things up downfield. It's pure offensive knowledge at that point, because the more you run the ball, the more your safeties on defense are going to get sucked up, the more your linebackers are going to come up. It's going to open things up across the middle of the field. Mm-hmm. It's football knowledge. And a offensive coordinator like Satterfield, who's been in the game for a long time, should know that. The fact that they haven't run the ball very much is very concerning. They've got the running backs to run the damn ball.
Without a doubt.
You just need to do it consistently. You need to run the ball more than 30 times. Like, I get putting some of the, stuff on Dylan's shoulders, but he's a true freshman quarterback. I don't think he's ready to quite win us a game yet. You need to give him help.
Without a doubt.
So my ultimate, statement, and it's like, man, Sat, please put this offense in a place to succeed the next few weeks, because the offense has been the ultimate downfall of this team. Even in some of the wins, it's been the ultimate downfall of this team. It's like, quit trying to get a lead and quit trying to hold on to it. Why not go put more points on the damn board? Put the game in doubt.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm tired of that NFL mentality. You're playing in a conference where an offense will catch fire on you pretty quick. So put points on the board. And that's my TED Talk today.
No, I mean, it's a good one. I'm glad people are tuning in because I think it's an important one to tune into. I think the Huskers have a lot to prove still, but I think they definitely can prove it. So time will tell. Obviously, next episode, we will hopefully be touching back in on at least a close game, if not a victory. Moving on, it's time for our weekly top five. Obviously, plenty of top fives you can do, both past, present, future, whatever that might be. But today, we are looking at the quarterback position, specifically the current quarterback position, and we are looking at the top five current Division One quarterbacks in the FBS. Mark, let's hear your list.
All right. So number 5, I'm gonna put Shedeur Sanders at number 5. Shedeur is pretty good. I mean, he's 195, 270, 72% completion percentage for almost 2,300 yards, 19 touchdowns to only 6 interceptions. He's been pretty solid. Number 4, I'm gonna go Jackson Dart for Ole Miss. He's 151 for 215, 70% completion percentage, 14 touchdowns to only 3 interceptions. Number 3, I've got Chandler Morris for North Texas. He's putting up some pretty good numbers for North Texas this year. His completion percentage is a little lower. It's 186 for 294, so 63% completion percentage for 2,400 yards, 23 touchdowns, though, to 8 interceptions. And I made this list before yesterday. I wish I hadn't. But I put Kyle McCord at number 2. Kyle McCord is 220 for 346. 63.6% completion percentage, 2,481 yards, 19 touchdowns to now 11 interceptions. Numbers could be worse, but had his 5 interceptions yesterday not happen, I would feel a lot better with him at number 2. And then going into number 1, I've got Cam Ward. Cam Ward has looked awesome at quarterback this year. 169 for 246, almost a 69% completion percentage, over 2,500 yards, 24 touchdowns to only 5 interceptions. All in all, it's a pretty solid list. Pretty good quarterbacks. I just wish Kyle McCord didn't have his little letdown performance yesterday, because it would make me feel a little better about number 2. But yeah, what's your list? What's your list looking like?
A lot of those names are on my list, a little different order, but we'll get right on it. Because of his performance yesterday, Kyle McCord is my number 5. He definitely was more like my 3, but that performance bumped him back a little bit for sure. Coming at number 4, this is the player I told you about before we went on. That is a player that isn't at maybe one of the top schools, but he has the stats, and that's Chandler Morris for North Texas. He's having himself a season. Shout out to Chandler Morris. And then coming at number 3, I do have Shedeur Sanders. Shedeur Sanders is as underwhelming as I think CU is overall as a team, top to bottom, even though, yes, they do have an extremely, far improvements record than they did last season. They're still an underwhelming team in a lot of areas. He is still a top talent. So he's my number 3. And then number 2, I actually have Jackson Dart. I think that he is – I don't want to say underrated because obviously he's on your list, but I think he is a quarterback that belongs in that top 3 conversation. And then we definitely have the same number 1. That's Cam Ward. One of the top in the Heisman conversation, and definitely I would say the top quarterback, and he's starting to kind of space that out, and it's a little bit less of a close race on who's the best. I think he definitely is the best by quite a bit.
Yeah. I think it's, no doubt that Cam Ward's definitely the top quarterback in the in college this year. And yeah, how about Chandler Morris for North Texas? North Texas is looking pretty dangerous on offense with him, at the helm. Jackson Dart, obviously needs no introduction. He's been pretty good for Ole Miss for a few years now. Yeah, pretty solid list. I mean, this would be a list that you would expect to see like Carson Beck, because Carson Beck plays at Georgia. You know how many weapons that he has around him at Georgia. Um, or like looking at how well Indiana's playing, like Curtis Rourke. You would expect to see Curtis Rourke up there. But yeah, I think this year it's been a pretty interesting season thus far. I mean, we've still got a few weeks left to see how some of the stats races kind of end up, as well as the Heisman race. I'm excited, man. There's so much parity going on in college football this year. And like I said last week, I can't wait for the inaugural 12-team playoff, because I think we could see some upsets with the 12-team playoff, and who knows, we could have a different national champion, more often than not.
Oh, yeah. There's definitely room for much more parity come postseason with that 12-team lineup. And we'll definitely, within the next few episodes, relook at that top 12 and kind of go over it and go over a few other factors, because we're getting closer to postseason and getting closer to conference championship play. So we will definitely touch in on that within the next few episodes. But so much exciting college football left. It's great to be able to bring this to you guys and to be able to give you guys a little pre-college football slate action, because obviously we're bringing this to you before the football day starts, and there is a lot of football to be played today.
A lot of football to be played. As always, if you guys have anything you guys want us to touch on, hit us up in the comments. Hit us up on our Facebook page as well. And we'll make sure we get to as many of those as possible. But as always, we appreciate you guys for watching and listening, and we hope you guys enjoy the college football slate today. We'll see you next week.